Hello, everyone, and welcome. We have a very special guest today. He is one of the world's leading high-altitude mountain climbers, and he is a phenomenal motivational speaker. He's climbed Mount Everest 14 times, which is an unbelievable achievement. And it's even more notable when you learn that he actually suffered a fall that shattered both his heel bones. So he managed not just to walk again, but actually climb Everest 14 times, which is pretty amazing. He's also one of the world's most sought-after guides, and he actually guided Sir Ranulph Fiennes up Everest in 2009, which is amazing. So I am, of course, talking about Kenton Cool. Welcome, Kenton. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Lisa. No, it's a pleasure.
So I really want to know, so how did you go from rock climbing to high-altitude mountaineering? How did that jump happen?
Well, for me, it seemed to be a very obvious journey or pathway. The era that I began to climb was probably the last era where people were very much focused on the bigger mountains. So today, for instance, people get into climbing and they're arguably more focused on the rock climbing or the bouldering, like the smaller level stuff. I came in obviously pre-internet in the mid to late 90s, and it was books. And the books that were inspiring us were by the likes of Sir Chris Bonington, Doug Scott, big coffee table books, all about the big mountains. And from very early on, that was my destiny. That's where I wanted to go. So for me, it was very logical. Whereas I think today, the pathway, the journey is perhaps a little bit different with many people, many climbers out there.
Yeah. So do you remember your first ever Everest climb? The first time you went up?
Yeah.
Vividly.
I mean, who wouldn't? It was to David Attenborough, the very famous BBC sort of wildlife presenter. He used to be a climber, and excuse a slight sexist thing, but he said that there can't be a red-blooded male in the world who hasn't at some stage dreamed about climbing Everest. So, of course, when you're given that opportunity to climb Everest for the first time, everything is a wonderment on steroids. And you get there, and it's like, whoa! It's like a baby in the child in the candy shop. So I remember it vividly, absolutely vividly, from first getting there and feeling a little bit out of my comfort zone, because I was there as a leader. So from the very outset, I was professionally looking after people there, which for me was a huge step. Mm-hmm. Never been on a 8,000 meter peak before. And all of a sudden looking after two paying clients. So that, and working with a Sherpe team that at the time I didn't know. Right. So trying to work those little nuances was challenging, but exciting. Through to stepping onto the summit on my own. Ego is not a great thing to have, but to satisfy to a certain extent your own ego by stepping on the summit, it was wonderful. Every single step of the way, it was. Yeah, I remember it to the day I die.
So one of our viewers has actually asked, when you stepped onto the summit for that very, very first time, what was the first emotion that you felt? What was like the first thing that went through your head?
Well, I was really lucky. I was with Pema Dorji, I think his name was, who very sadly lost his life about 2 years later in an avalanche. And we were coming up together. We were the first team of the year. The client was 5, 7, 8 minutes behind me. You could just see him coming up. And Pema very, very sweetly slowed up so that I got there, and I had just a couple of minutes on my own. And I got there, and I suppose it's one of those things, on the first summit at least, it was one of those things, I couldn't quite comprehend what was happening. I remember looking around and thinking, oh wow, I've got to try and clock some of those peaks underneath me. They might have climbing objectives that I can do in the future. And then I actually got the sat phone out and I phoned my mother. And so I rang her up, and I'll quickly tell you the story. So I ring her up. It must be 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning in the UK. She rings up and she answers very quickly. And she said, "Oh, hi, dear. How are you?" I'm like, "Mum, yeah, great. Oh, how's that cough?" "Oh, yeah, the cough's really good, thank you." And then there's a pause, and she said, "Where are you?" As if she didn't know. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. She knows it's summit day. And so I tell her, and she's like, "That's nice, dear. Now, if you want to speak for your father, he couldn't sleep last night, so he's out walking the dog. Any chance you can call back?" And the thing I love about that is only a mother can bring you back down to earth, completely checks your ego, puts it to one side, and then gets back to what it is. And that actually really helped, because it helped the focus to get back down.
Right.
Ed Viesturs famously once said, "Getting to the top is optional, but getting back down is mandatory." And it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but getting to the top is only halfway. And the majority of the hiccups, the accidents, they generally occur on the way down.
Yeah.
And that's where my job as a mountain guide, I really have to step up to the plate.
Because that's the kind of weird thing about mountaineering, isn't it? That for a lot of sports, the finish line, the main goal that you think about and you dream about is the finish line, which is the end of the race or the end of whatever, right? But with mountaineering, you're thinking about a summit, and really you're thinking about the halfway point, which is a really strange kind of goal.
Well, yeah, but then it comes back to goal setting. So how do you set the goal? How do you set out the vision? How do you communicate that? If everybody on the team is on board and invested in where the finish line actually is, the finish line is through the front door at home.
Yeah,
sure. So generally, when I engage with clients, I make a pledge whereby I would say I would do everything in my power to facilitate them coming through the front door at the end of each and every expedition we do, because that is success. Yeah. Anything that happens between leaving home and getting back home, well, that's a bonus. So first and foremost, it's safe, then have loads of fun, and then have some summits. But it's setting where that goal is. Mm-hmm. And if one, as a client, focuses solely on the top, then, and we've experienced this, you get up there, you're mentally drained, but then you're physically drained rather, but then you mentally start to crumble because you've achieved the ambition, the goal that you've had your sights set on. But then you've got to turn your back on it, and you've got 2 days to get back down to base camp. 2 days of hard physical effort. And if your mind is not in the right place, then that becomes amplified. And in many cases, well, not many cases, but in a few cases, that's where people don't have the fortitude to get back down. Right. I mean, if you read the journals about where the accidents happen on Everest and where the deaths normally occur, it's almost invariably on the way down. And it'll be a combination of maybe poor leadership. It will definitely be some poor judgment, possibly poor preparation. There may be some uncontrollables, the weather, etc., in there. But most of the reasons for failure are under what I would deem the controllables. There's been some poor choices being made. And then the goal hasn't been set properly. And generally people have that crumble of mental fortitude, which puts the guide and the guiding team, the Sherpas, in very difficult circumstances. But then we have to look after the client to get them back down safely. So because I love it. I mean, it really is. I often say when I speak in the corporate world, what keeps you sharp? What keeps you sharp on a daily basis? And for us, it's literally staying alive. So we're so lucky to have that. If we're not sharp, every time we get on that mountain, somebody's going to hurt themselves.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of leads into my next question, really, because obviously climbing an 8,000 meter peak is no joke just by yourself. Climbing it and guiding clients safely up and down it is a whole other thing. So how do you judge when a client needs a bit of a push, a bit of a motivational, come on, you can do it, or when you sort of think, you know what, I think these people need to turn around, they haven't got anything left in the tank?
Yeah, so I'm really lucky. I work in a very bespoke way on the mountain or in the mountains. I predominantly work one-to-one. And I spend a long time building relationships with my clients, meaningful, deep relationships, not transactional ones that don't mean anything. So, for instance, if I go to Mount Everest, I've generally been working with that individual for 2, possibly 3 years. We've been to different mountains. We've trained in the Alps. We may have done stuff in the UK. We've almost certainly been to South America or to the Himalayas beforehand. So we have a good relationship which almost transcends beyond simply the guide-client relationship.
Right.
I invest myself, I know wives and husbands and daughters and sons and fathers, and everybody is invested in the project because ultimately it could go wrong. So everybody needs to know the reason why. Why is this individual doing it? And then once you know the reasons why, then you can start building the relationship. The reason why the relationship is so important, if you do have to make those critical decisions, those really hard decisions, if you have the right relationship, then those decisions actually become pretty straightforward. Because I have a vested interest in that person. They're not simply another face. They're not simply a name on a piece of paper. They're a friend of mine. And I want the very best for that person. Now, that's not necessarily going to the top.
Yeah.
The very best for that person is for them to come home to their family. So I would do anything in my power to facilitate that. At the same time, I'm a fun merchant. I want people to have a smile like you've got on your face right now. I want people to see the mountains in the way that I do. Go, wow! So I try to facilitate that as well. So it's a balance between the two. But it comes down to relationship. Build the right relationships.
Have you ever had to turn somebody around who was convinced that they could make it, but you look at it, the situation, you think, I'm looking at the time, you're nowhere near the turnaround time, and you've still got another 3 hours to the summit or something? Have you ever had that difficult shout?
No, I've not got that far. So in more modern times, so I changed my working practice in 2010 from working in groups, which is great from a monetary side of things. Economies of scale. If you have one client drop out, you've got 5, where it doesn't really matter. But we had a hiccup. We had a near miss very high on the mountain. Client slipped, hurt her back. We got her down, but it really made me reflect on best working practice. And that's when I started working in a bespoke manner that I do. The lovely thing about building relationships is or I know, or the client knows as well, before we get to the mountain, if this is going to be a legitimate attempt to climb the peak. And it's too expensive. There's too much money, there's too much time, there's too much pride on the line, and there's too much danger for the client to pull the wool over his or her eyes, or for me to let that happen and to go there. So I've been very lucky. I've not had to make that difficult decision high on the mountain, because we know before then, because of that relationship that we have. So, I mean, it's a working practice that I love because it gives me huge degrees of flexibility. However, it's very hard to then upscale. If I'm just working with one client every year, it's impossible to upscale. Because people buy into me, not necessarily, people want to be associated with myself and my track record and my decision-making ability. They don't necessarily see the team underneath, the amazing Sherpa team that we have, who also have a huge depth of experience.
Yeah, totally.
My key Sherpa team and myself, we've got nearly 100 summits of Everest between us.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
The depth of experience is there. We've seen it before. So we can deal with most things that get thrown at us.
Yeah, totally.
I'm so proud of the team. They're amazing.
So you have to be a mountaineer, you have to be a pretty good communicator as well, right? Because it's not just you on the mountain, it's a whole load of other teams from around the world. There's Sherpas, there's lots of different languages and cultures bouncing around. So you have to be a pretty good communicator. What sort of lessons have you learned about communicating with such a diverse range of people to achieve a goal?
It's very simple. Keep it simple. I mean, I was doing a little thing like this only the other day about crisis management. And one of the key things in crisis management is communication. Get the communication lines open, keep it relevant, keep it succinct, keep it accurate, especially high on the mountain. Key things that we need to know. What do we know? When did we know it? And what don't we know? And with the Sherpas, you're absolutely right. There's language issues there. The Sherpas don't have English as their first language. The majority of them have good English. But you can imagine you've got an oxygen mask on, you're breathing like down like Darth Vader, you've got the wind blowing, you're into a crackly radio. The language has to be basic. Now, I'm not putting the Sherpas down with their intellect. They're amazingly cultured, clever folk. But they're not dealing in their first language. So the communication needs to be simple, relevant, and the language needs to be one that everybody can understand. Because if you start getting communication lines mixed up, then you start getting yourself in a whole world of pain.
Yeah. So obviously, experiences at high altitude at 8,000 meters is very different from 7,000, which is very different from 6, which is very different from 5, right? I haven't climbed to 8,000. I have gone to 6, and the headache was quite immense. So that was a great experience. I don't think you yeah, and I think after that, hangovers are like, they're not that bad anymore in comparison to a high altitude headache. So I think once you experience that, you're all good. But obviously you can't talk about Everest without a bit of a negative side of discussion coming up, unfortunately. Yep. And we see that the media, in my opinion, tend to ignore the positive things that happen, and you get the photos of the large queues and the deaths and stuff like that. So there was one thing I wanted to touch on first was obviously the queues and people saying that it's now overcrowded and that's what's causing this huge sort of snowball of risk. What kind of, from your personal experience of being there, is that what's really going on?
So yeah, lots of things going on. I've never queued. In Forte, in a sense, on that mountain, I've never stood in a queue waiting my turn. I think that myself and the team and my clients, we have the experience that we can bypass queues. Because they do build up a little bit. Let's take a step back. It's a really big mountain. It has an ability to absorb lots of people until summit day. And summit day, everybody gets funneled together and there's one line up and you get people on it. So yes, I mean, lots of the listeners or the viewers probably have seen Nims's photograph from a couple of years ago, a big queue of people just down from the Hillary Step, or Ralph's picture from 2012, 2013, big queue of people on the Lhotse face. It does occasionally happen. And of course, the media love negativity. Let's look at the press over the last couple of months in the UK. I think they should be held accountable. I really do. The press, unfortunately, in this day and age, they're nothing more generally than ill-informed rumour mongering. And it's naughty. It's very naughty. And we get the same on Everest. Most of the people that have an opinion on Everest are not the Western mountain guides, the very experienced Sherpa guides and leaders, or the Sherpa teams. They're potentially paying clients or the armchair athletes that see the picture and go, oh my goodness, that's not mountaineering, that's queuing up at your local Waitrose or whatever it is. Yes, there are queues there, but the queues aren't really down to numbers of people on the mountain. It's down to the level of experience of people on the mountain. And then also it's down to the values and the morals of the operators. So for instance, I spent 3 years working with one client to get him or her to the position that I think they have a legitimate chance of going and summiting safely on the mountain. If I say no to that person, they can pick up the phone and ring a dozen different operators, and somebody is going to say, oh yes, come on, come to Everest. You've never worn crampons before? Doesn't matter. We'll teach you on the job. Like, oh my God. I'm making up. So a lawyer who's never worn crampons before is going to go to Everest and attempt to climb it. At what point in their decision-making process do they think that's a good idea? No way in the world would I jump into a courtroom and attempt to be a lawyer without any training. And what's going to happen if I go into court? I might lose a case. Somebody might laugh me out. What happens if you go to Everest with no training, with no experience? You're potentially going to die or drag people down with you. That's the failing on Everest. It's not the numbers, it's the experience and also the values of some of the operators. It will almost take anybody because they've got the cash to go.
Yeah, and something like this did happen, didn't it? Quite a few years ago. I just want to bring one case up, that the death of a gentleman, a British gentleman called David Sharpe, who died on the north side of the mountain. And he died pretty high up. I think he was in Green Boots Cave. And there was an absolute storm, a media storm, where several mountaineers and several operators got blamed that they didn't help this potentially, well, he was sort of incapacitated, maybe he was completely unconscious, man down the mountain. So at 8,000 meters, how can you explain to our listeners what it would be like, how unreasonable that actually is to ask you to carry me down if I'm completely incapacitated?
It's almost impossible. So at 8,000 meters, even with supplementary oxygen, you are fighting for your very own existence. So almost every team will have a strategy for the day, for the summit day. And they, to a certain extent, have to stick with it. So the incident you're referring to, the climber and the team that got lambasted was Russell Bryce and Himex, which was totally unfair because David Sharpe was not on Russell's team. Russell's team were the one that came across him. Russell went, then it gives you an idea of some of the operators. Russell went from camp to camp at base camp, trying to find out who this climber was. Nobody knew who he was, what nationality he was, or who he was with. It took Russell 2 days to find out. He went back to the same camp twice before that particular camp went, oh, hang on, where's that English chap?
Oh my God.
Nobody, so that's the difference between a good operator, and Russell is a good operator like Russell with Himex or Adventure Consultants or myself. We charge a lot of money. Or you can pay peanuts and be down here. And the level of service, the poles apart.
Yep.
So Russell spent 2 days going around trying to find out what the hell was going on with David Sharpe. The team didn't have the resources to do anything about it. Russell's got his own clients who have paid for his team to look after them high on the mountain. They're burning through their own oxygen. You've got somebody that's semi-conscious, who's got no oxygen. If you don't know who he is, already deeply frostbitten and incapacitated, what do? Do you look after the person that's almost certainly going to die, or do you look after the people that have paid you to look after them? Now, it's a huge moral conundrum, one that I'm not going to say one's right, one's wrong. I mean, it's very difficult. It's impossible to cast judgment on decisions that people have made high on mountains unless we're actually there.
Right.
Look at in the whole touching the void thing, where his friend Simon Yates cut the rope on it. A load of people say Simon did the wrong thing. We weren't there. I had a late turnaround time, so I summited at almost 3:30. So normally on Everest, you turn around at 1 o'clock. I turned around at 3:30. I got flack for that, but I was the one making the key decisions. I was the one actually there. It's very difficult to look back retrospectively and say, should have done this or should have done that. All we can do is learn from it and then move on. So what the industry learned from David Sharpe was there needs to be better accountability for the operators. And the really interesting thing, I'm going to stand up for Russell here. Russell was the one that freighted all of David Sharpe's equipment back to the UK. Russell was the one that liaised with the family. Russell was the one that actually went to the funeral. The operator that David Sharpe bought into did none of that. Washed his hands and walked away. So there is issues on Everest. It's not a clean-cut industry by any stretch of the imagination. But to give the viewers an idea of trying to operate at 8,000 meters, put a plastic bag over your head, put a very small hole in it, make everything really windy, take all your clothes off and so you're freezing cold, run around so you can hardly breathe, and then it's like trying to operate in hell. Even for myself, I get anxious before summit. It's arguably the most dangerous work environment in the world. There's no rescue. The decisions you make have life-altering consequences. You literally have a team of Sherpas that I'm in charge of. I have a paying client, and I'm responsible for all of that. It's super stressful. And then added to the fact that you're trying to look after yourself, you're freezing cold, you're not getting enough oxygen, your brain is being starved of oxygen, so your ability for rational thought disappears. Ironic, really, because the time you really need it. Yeah, I love working on Everest. I'd be very honest. Summit day scares the producers out of me.
Yeah, because it's such a long day as well, right? What's the average length of a summit day?
With a good client, so we try to get back down to Camp 2. So pushing 24 hours from leaving top camp. Well, perhaps a bit less, maybe 20 hours. Yeah, and you try and look after your own nutrition. You're worried about your own safety. You look after your own hydration. You're trying to look after the team, where the team are, oxygen levels. You've got an eye on the weather. I employ something called binary thinking. As I mentioned, the lack of oxygen affects our brain. So we don't have the bandwidth to assimilate lots of information. So I try to keep it really simple. 5 things. That's all I'm concerned about. 5 things are: how much oxygen do we have? Where, how are the team members, the Sherpas and the paying client, both mentally and physically? What is the weather doing? What is the underfoot conditions? And what is the time? Because we have that non-negotiable hard deadline, 1 o'clock turnaround time. 5 things. I don't give a monkey's about anything else. Those 5 things. Binary thinking. Keep it as simple as possible. And that, if you're lucky, gives you enough bandwidth if something goes wrong. So you have the capacity in your brain to work with it. It's like you probably heard this, when fighter pilots are trying to land on a carrier, there's so much going on, their capacity bucket is full. Apparently, if you ask them a question, what's your mother's name, they won't answer you. And the reason why they haven't answered you is because they haven't heard the question.
Wow.
Because they're working overtime, trying to get the plane to hit the deck, that the first thing that gets affected is your hearing. Your brain literally turns off, so it doesn't have any more overload.
That's
incredible.
incredible.
They call it the ball. As soon as they have the ball, that's it. They're just focused on getting that plane down. The capacity bucket is full. And it's the same on Everest. It's full for different reasons. It's full because we're starving our brains of oxygen. but your brain literally cannot operate properly. So, boy, summit day, it scares me stupid. But I think that's a good thing. Keeps us sharp.
Yeah, and it means that you don't get into a complacent situation with how many times you've done it and stuff. So you're obviously one of the most, I follow you on Instagram. You're probably the most motivated person I've ever met in my entire life. And every single day it's like, yeah, it's Wednesday. Yeah, it's Thursday. Yeah, it's Tuesday. Which is great, because sometimes I have days where I'm just like, oh, I just can't do it. I can't get myself out. So to people who are listening, who like maybe have those days, especially now in lockdown, how can they what can they pull on to get that motivation and that fire back to kind of get on with whatever they're doing?
So, I mean, there's a couple of things. Lots of coffee. I've moved on to my expedition coffee cup because there's getting more in it. I'm driven by caffeine. But there's a number of things which I found have really helped. So I've really looked at my nutrition. So loads of vegetables and things like that. And I know it sounds stupid, but that really helps. If you start getting full of crap food, that affects your moods, it affects your functionality. And the other thing I've been working really hard on is, and I got this from the climber Nims. I interviewed Nims on my own show called Conversations a couple of weeks ago. And Nims was talking about being battle ready, about being ready for when you need to. Now, at some stage in a not too distant future, things are going to open up again. And opportunity is going to come back, and the lockdown is going to disappear. We're not going to be back to normal. We all know that. But the thing that keeps driving me forward is when that happens, myself and the team, we need to be battle ready. We don't know what for. I don't know if I can go to Pakistan this summer. I'm meant to be going to Pakistan with a client to climb in Pakistan. I'm hoping to go to Everest in the autumn because Everest this year has been cancelled in the spring. So, we've got these trips that we're looking towards. I'm working towards them as if it's going to happen because that's what we have to do. We have to be battle ready in case these things do happen. And that's what drives me forward. And in terms of my buoyance, I'm not always buoyant. I have bad days. We all do. I like to think I'm honest enough that I hold my hand up and go, you know what, guys? I'm having a bit of a rough one today. I hope you understand. Maybe you can help me. Because I think, especially nowadays, we all have a killer network, or a lot of us do. Lean on that network in times of crisis. This is a network. This is a crisis, rather. This is a true crisis. So lean on that network. Don't be too proud to ask for help or assistance. Or to say, you know what, Lisa, I'm not feeling it today, but I'm going to be back tomorrow for you. And tomorrow I'm going to crush it. The final thing, I suppose, on this and motivation and being positive is, okay, so you're doing a workout or you're climbing Everest. Okay, so we summit down Everest. You and I are climbing Everest. Okay, it sucks. Okay, summit day is going to suck. You're too cold, then you're too hot. You're not getting enough oxygen in. Your boot's hurting. Whatever it is, you've got a headache. Now you can turn around and go, oh, this sucks. This really sucks. I've got a headache. My boot's hurt. What good does it do? It doesn't do you any good. If you give the voice in your head a platform, it's going to amplify itself. And all of a sudden, it becomes a huge negative. Or you can give the little positivity of voice a platform and boom. And that's what I try to do every morning. I find the positive. I don't care what the positive is. Pissing down with rain. Okay, it's horrible outside. It's muddy. I love running in the rain. Why not? Go out there. Yeah, it's raining. Infectious being positive is. Because we all have down periods. We all have low points. You see it on expedition. You've been on expedition. It's not all. It does this. So when you're low, you need to lean on people. And when you're high, you need to be there for others. And I'm lucky. I'm most of the time really bubbly. So I try to put it out there through whatever platform it is. It could be Instagram, it could be Twitter, it could be just a hug for the children. Now, I can't go around hugging people in the street at the moment. Well, you can't do that normally. No. You know what I mean? You got to share the love sometimes.
Yeah.
It really helps. I think it really helps.
So where can our viewers go to follow you and hear more? Tell us a bit about where they can go to listen to your cool conversations and check out more stuff you do.
I got to hijack a minute. I've got to put it out. Cool Conversations. It's fab. We've got beautiful local theatre here in Cirencester in the Cotswolds. It's had to shut 3 shows. So it's facing closure because of the whole COVID thing. And Yuan, who's a young artistic director, put his heart out there and said he does not see why. He will, I forget exactly what his quote was, but he basically said, over his dead body will this place shut. He will continue to build audiences. So we're taking everything online. So Cool Conversations is simply me having a chat with some of my friends. So tonight we've got Victoria Pendleton. Last week we had Melissa Arnott, the American climber. We've had Ant Middleton. We've had Nims. We've got Joe Simpson next week, the
amazing
climber. And it's all we're trying to do is generate an audience for the theatre. It's all free. And if anybody wants to donate at the end, it's entirely up to them. And you can find that at the Barn Theatre on social media or just on my channels. There's only one Kenton Cool out there. That is COOL, by the way. So it's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc., etc. And it's Thursday evenings. But you can also find me on Instagram, etc., etc. I'm on most of the social media channels. It's one of those double-edged swords, isn't it? Social media is one of the biggest distractions that we have in our lives. At the same time, it can be a huge positive if used correctly.
And you should go onto his website and check out his Land Rover video, which is the most badass car video I think I've ever seen, and it's just epic, and the scenery's epic, everything's epic about it. So if you haven't done that, go check it out.
I'm dying to climb in Kazakhstan.
It looks awesome.
Yeah. So we shot the Land Rover advert, the new Defender advert there last September. Spent about a week there in total. Epic scenery. It just shows you how important it is to travel. I think by travel, we open our minds to different cultures, different people, different ways of life. And we can bring that back into our everyday life. People often ask me the question, what is it? How do you feel when you come back to civilization from expedition, when you come back to normal life? Well, the question, the answer, what is normal life? And I think we're experiencing that right now. What is normality? Because when I go on expeditions, I see generosity of heart, I see community, I see shared cultures that I don't see in our own society, mainly because we're a capitalist society. We're more concerned about the individual than the collective. Mm-hmm. You go on a big expedition, and we are about the collective because the individual doesn't matter anymore. We can't succeed on our own. So I bring this back each time, and for me, it's a reset. Because slowly over time, the capitalist society that we're in, the one-upmanship, we always got to better ourselves. That grinds you down. So the expedition, or when I travel, it resets that, and I come back with a different mindset, one that is more inclusive, I suppose, for other people. And that I truly believe you can only get that from travel, by traveling and seeing different cultures. There's something there's something about mountain people. Maybe it's a harsh way of life that they're in, but they're all
and the shared suffering as well. You're sharing this suffering together, and it's like it bonds you in a way you can't bond anywhere else, I think.
Exactly that. I think you sum it up so well. So the local people, they have that shared suffering. They get through it by the generosity, the community, the friendships, the family. They are the important things. And right now in the crisis that we are in, again, it's all of those things. And despite our media, you do see it seeping through. Families pulling together, communities pulling together. It's amazing what a time of crisis can achieve. And
I can't believe that you've actually made me finish this interview feeling really positive about the lockdown. I didn't think that would happen, but now I feel really positive about it. So
why shouldn't we feel positive? So I just going to leave you with resource. Okay, so there's three main resources that we have. It's money, time, and focus. Okay, so money being capital. So let's just put that to one side for now. So we now all have time and focus left. And most of us are time positive right now, which is a lovely situation to be in. But, and the key thing, and I'm guilty of this, how do we keep the focus? Because it's so easy to let that time drift by because we're not focused. So we need to use our time productively. And that's where being battle ready comes into it. By having the goal, okay, we don't quite know where the finish line is in this instance. Is it next week in the UK? Is it the week after? Well, we don't quite know. But it doesn't mean that we can't be battle ready. And the only way we can be battle ready is focus and use our time wisely. So that's the key thing.
Now, if you learn nothing else, everybody, that's what you got to remember.
If you can't do that in lockdown, geez.
It's true. It's true. This is the best opportunity we have. Well, thank you so much for your time, Kenton, and thanks for sharing those stories with the cybersecurity community. I'm sure everyone is just fascinated. Kenton has a book. He has an amazing website. Like I said, go check him out on social media and follow him, because you'll definitely get some motivation to go out and get away from our computers, which is really good. Thank you so much for coming, Kenton. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.